and also hand a copy to your opponent. So you cast the spell, and then if you want, you get a second copy of the spell and you share with your opponent. So like you get 2, they get 1. I mean, it's not fair, but I mean, it's legacy after all.
Sure. I'm with you.
So yeah, and then at that point, you shuffle your library, and then you start revealing cards from the top of your library until you hit, I think, a non-land card. Yeah. So you hit a non-land card, and you don't put that into play, but you cast it, which is important because everything we are playing is Cascaders. And as you know, you cascade, you keep going. This is why it's called the Mississippi River. You're literally riding down the river. You see the picture I'm painting in your head? You go all the way down. You have all these super expensive cascaders because all of our cascaders are 6 mana and up. So eventually, we will once again cascade into the next creative technique. And now here we go. We cast that again. If we want to, we can copy it again. The opponent gets another copy. We come down until the 4th copy of creative technique, at which point we have probably put like something like 100 power into play and an Emrakul. There's a Maelstrom Wanderer somewhere in between. You get the idea. If Aren ever gets to that, we're going to see a complete explosion on the board. The way you play the deck is you really have to have creative technique in hand because there's literally no way to dig for it. So I would very much assume Aren has it in her hand and plays a bunch of these soul lands, right? These comes into play lands from, let's say, Mercadia. Our deck, by the way, the deck very, very susceptible to Wasteland. Victor would have
there's only 3 copies in the 5-color Zenith deck, but Victor able to have one here alongside his Delighted Halfling, a new card from Tales of Middle-earth. Aren did get to start the game with Gemstone Caverns. 4 copies of that card actually present in her deck list this weekend. Sarpazin Scary was the one. I hope I said that right. I've never seen that card played.
Very much
just
correct.
Sandstone Needle is the played one. What was deployed. I believe this card here.
It could be like, is it Havenwood Battleground? I'm actually not sure. It could be.
Yeah, the other lands it could be is the Hickory Woodlot, which doesn't have depletion counters, so I assume that's the Havenwood Battleground. Not a card I'd seen before, but it does. It's like a Crystal Vein that comes in tapped. Sacks for you can tap for a green, or you can sack it and get 2 greens. So yeah, a lot of these little bursts of mana available. We've seen some stuff like this happen with like the Garuda deck back when that was a thing. Just trying to get to 6 mana as quickly as possible so that they can start this really wacky combo that is very hard to counter. As you called out, Wasteland been a big part of the equation, and Victor doing quite a bit of cantripping here. Ponder, and now Green Sun Zenith. This looked to be for 0. Could have made it for 1 with Delighted Halfling. I guess interested in getting the mana started here a little bit, which means Dryad Arbor, the only target, the card coming for Victor. And there is the Dryad Arbor, our forest Dryad creature.
The 5-color deck on the other side, piloted by Victor, very, very mana hungry. It's basically like a mid-range / control deck. It's something like you take a Maverick deck and you put a bunch of blue cards into it and make it work that way. You have Yorion for like this super supreme endgame value. What the deck is not capable of is putting you under a lot of pressure. So Aren, I would guess she loves this position right now. She probably like played against these types of decks quite a lot. It's one of the more popular decks, both in paper and on Magic Online. The problem for Victor is going to be the demonstrate ability, because once Aren gets to creative technique, she can just like demonstrate, share the card with the opponent, and at that point, Victor would literally need 2 Force of First plus pitch card. I guess he could like eventually get to the point where he can hardcast one of them, but it's a word of art. But, and here's the thing, if Victor manages to navigate to a point where he survives by basically takes out both copies of the creative technique, Aren is in a world of hurt, because as I mentioned, the deck can literally not dig. The deck completely relies on the top deck. That's why it's so important to have one of these creative techniques in the hand at first. And this is the turn where Aren might go for it. Like, we got 5 mana available. 7 even, and we go. Oh my god! Okay, guys, watch this.
7 mana.
Like Race for Impact.
Walk me through this. This is what you've been so excited about.
Yeah.
You love this kind of stuff. I have never seen it before. It used to be called Waterfalls, I thought. All right, let me get this card up for you.
But actually, that works as well. Okay, I totally lied to you, by the way. Okay, if we ever get to 6 mana,
boarding party. Okay,
exactly.
We're cascading past all of these cards.
Casting our cascaders, and that is like, our cantrips cost 6 mana here, but they always hit.
Yeah, and there is, we got another reader here. Let's get creative technique on screen. You see the demonstrate. When you cast a spell, you may copy it. If you choose an opponent to also copy it, shuffle, reveal until you reveal a non-land card, exile that, put the rest on bottom. You can cast it without paying its mana cost. Have to imagine that we're going to be casting that. And so here is, I believe these are the copies. Aren very wisely bringing copies for creative technique to represent the stack very well, which we appreciate here in the booth. I assume that this...
Yeah, one of those copies is going to belong to Victor.
Opponents first? Is this active, non-active thing where the opponent's copy resolves first?
I would assume so, right? So Victor gets to do it. Like you reveal something. Victor has a bunch of stuff that he can hit, but I don't think there's much that can really hit that helps him here.
he gets another read here. All right, what do I got to do for this thing? All right, I shuffle my library, reveal until okay, I got a Swords to Plowshares. Nothing has resolved yet, so I am not gonna cast that. Says Victor. Oh, it's exiled. Okay, so it's not like Cascade where you can choose not to cast it. That was just gonna be an exile, and you can cast it right now or never. And so now it's Aren's turn. So we got the copy from Creative Technique resolving. Here's a boarding party. And so there's another copy of it. Oh, we're going to be building a crazy stack.
There's going to be another copy of Creative Technique. And if Aren wants to, she can like copy that again. Here we go. Seriously, people I was going to say head to nerdridegaming.com.
Oh, Nissa. Okay, we got Nissa Resurgent Animist for Victor Wood. This was like casual magic, Julian. What are we doing?
No, this is deep. Like I see Aren in the top 8 already.
Legacy NRG. Oh my goodness.
Oh no, seriously.
Right.
Like,
we got a reader on that side.
If you've never seen this deck, you would think like, okay, well, what's the worst that can happen? I can force of this. No, you need to force of twice. Like, I guess the best thing you can actually have against this deck is something like a Flusterstorm, so you can actually split it up. Oh yeah, here comes our big bad spider. I think that's Sweet Gum Recluse.
Sweet Gum Recluse.
And I'm not even gonna pretend I know what the card does other than cascading.
all right, and that one's going to cascade into the third copy of Creative Technique there. Have to imagine this one's going to be demonstrated as well. And yeah, there is the copies for Aren, who's going to be able to do the thing. Collector Ouphe.
It's like, doesn't really matter. Okay, yeah, you get it down if you want to. By the way, people in chat, like, get your friends in here.
Oh, you had to shuffle first. I see what we're doing. We're supposed to shuffle first. He didn't shuffle first. So sure, whatever.
This is literally the only place you can see this deck in action. No streamer can show you this deck. Probably no tournament can show you this deck. Literally, hit up your friends. This is like an historic moment in Magic. As long as this card is not Magic Online, this is one of the very, very few times of the year that you will actually be able to see this in action. So hit up your friends, post it somewhere, and get this on screen because this is amazing.
Omnath, that's got to be a good hit. Like, as far as hits go randomly off the top of your 5-color Zenith deck, the one of Omnath is quite a good hit. That one's going to resolve, draw a card. Pretty good alongside the Nissa and the Fetch Land. Can we do any kind of tricks here in response? I don't think we can.
And you know what? At some point, we would just like love to go from end the world or whatever. That is like that Galaxy Bird is basically like dealing 2 damage to every creature that didn't come into play this turn, if I remember correctly. So
that's actually pretty good. That kills like Dryad Arbor and the Delighted Halfling, right? All right.
Yeah. Then we go deeper. We keep going deeper. At some point, we want to kind of hit like a Maelstrom Wanderer on the very first Creative Technique because then all of our spells get like, as far as I remember, like double Cascade. And I'm not sure. This is. We might come to an end after the 4th copy of Creative Technique. There's still like an Emrakul somewhere in there, so one of that we can hit. Since we have to shuffle every time, it's not like we're like that. Like it's deterministic that we are gonna get to it because there's, I guess, unless
like even if we miss on Emrakul or whatever, we just have this pile of garbage, right? Like we just have a bunch of stuff that like will just attack you. It's like Living End, right? Where you put a bunch of creatures and stuff in play that are just like kind of big, and you just get there. But of course, there's Maelstrom Wanderers and an Emrakul. There is a Maelstrom Wanderer. That's going to give all the creatures haste, and it's 2 more Cascades, so that's 2 more objects. Aren, you can see Aren's just having a great time. This is why you show up. This is what Legacy's about right here. I love this so much. Here we go.
Also, Victor being a very good sport about it, like sitting there, like watching all of this happen, like, okay, show me what you got. I want to see this. This is cool. Yeah, and the boarding parties, they have haste, right? So the boarding parties alone might be able to just like close the game out at some point.
Yeah, this might just be lethal. Well, the boarding parties have haste. Maelstrom Wanderer gives all of your creatures haste. So everything is going to have haste once this is all said and done.
Yeah, there's an Aurora Phoenix somewhere in there, which is another 5 in the air. Like, we got everything we want.
Victor has reached the point where he's not optimistic about his chance of getting another turn and needs to see what is going on here. We just continue to cascade into stuff because once again, the boarding party, now out of Creative Techniques, going to go through the entire deck and find nothing. So that's kind of the end of that first chain there. But of course, there's another Maelstrom Wanderer. So our first creature, all this stack that Aren has, we have the first resolved spell that's going to stay, the resolved permanent rather, that's going to stay in play. And there is an Aurora Phoenix.
The only thing that can be kind of annoying is like Aren has to literally shuffle every time in between things. But I think that they might be able to rather shortcut this. Yeah, they're like, okay.
Yeah, there goes the blockers. So we got a Nissa and an Omnath. Represents quite a bit of life. And yeah, we still have 3 Creative Techniques on the stack here somewhere. So we still got a lot more to do. We're not done. Aren has a lot of stuff. And okay, so we've hit an Aurora Phoenix. So that resolves the original there. Now we got this Spooter, which I think has an ETB ability. Enters the battlefield, put 3 counters on each of any number of target creatures that enter the battlefield this turn.
That's what we need, right?
Oh.
So you know what I'm wondering?
I figured it out, Julian.
You know what I'm yeah, that's the secret behind it. You know what I'm wondering? I wonder whether we will be able, because the only way to get Emrakul into play, and we don't need it, but it would be cool, is creative technique. So if all of our cascades and creative techniques hit literally all of our creatures, so there's only Emrakul and lands left in the deck, I think that's a very real possibility. Maybe not here because we hit the Maelstrom Wanderer kind of late. Okay, but we got it. Emrakul is here. Okay, yeah, because now we scoop.
Victor's seen enough and dead on turn, I believe 5? No, 4. Is Victor Wood, despite Wasteland and plenty of other tools. We will see what he can do about this absolute mess of a deck that he kind of didn't really look like he stood a chance of that. I mean, he Wastelanded, he got a little bit of stuff going, but like you said, the second that first Cascade spell was cast, it was just over. So let's take a look here at the sideboards after that wild ride. What Victor Wood is going to present the sideboard game. So we got a Yorion deck here, so you see it a little bit off screen, missing a little bit of the mana base, which includes the standard set of lands for the most part. 3 Wastelands, Karakas, maybe the most notable things in the mana base. But as far as sideboard goes, we're looking at 2 copies of Endurance, 1 Undermountain Adventurer, 1 Yorion Sky Nomad, 1 Hydroblast, 4 copies of Meltdown, 2 copies of Surgical Extraction, 1 Force of Negation, 3 Carpet of Flowers. Julian, how do you even go about starting to attack this deck?
Yeah, with this sideboard and with this main deck, probably not at all. Like, it's really, really hard for Victor here. This is one of the best matchups that Aren could have wished for. When I look at the sideboard, we do see the Hydroblast, of course, which still, once again, we need 2 copies of a counter spell to counter 1 copy of the creative technique. We can bring in the Force of Negation. Actually, we really, really should. And then we have to completely rely on our 8 forces and the 1 Hydroblast. Because as I mentioned, once you hit creative technique, it's going to be hard for the deck to draw into further copies unless it gets to 6 mana. And since we have like 3 copies of Wasteland, I could see something like Ramunap Excavator, you know, the basically the Crucible of Words on legs, which is going to allow you to play your Wastelands from the graveyard. If Victor gets out a turn 1 Accelerator, and then, I mean, if he's super, super fortunate, he can go turn 2 Ramunap Excavator, or at least like send it for it on the 3rd turn, and then establish somewhat like a Wasteland lock. There's a world where, you know, maybe Aren is never going to get to the 5 mana, the 6 mana that we need there to do anything. But that's kind of hard to make work, but it's a game plan. So basically we have 2 game plans: Wasteland lock or counter one of the creative techniques, and maybe even bring in 2 copies of Surgical, because once we take out those, it's... I mean, at that point, we have to deal with like 6 mana creatures. And I mean, it's a legacy deck after all. We should be able to do that. But we really, really, really have to make sure that Aren either never gets to cast the technique, or that we are super overloaded on counter spells. Which, you know, in an 80-card deck is not as easy as in a 60-card deck.
Very, very true. With that, let's take a look at what Aren's bringing to the table as far as sideboard adjustments go. This deck is crazy, so you can feast your eyes on the plenty of readers. We got to see a lot of them in the first game, thanks to how crazy this deck is and how many of its spells it's cast. But wow, that we're looking at the sideboard, we're looking at an Ave Progenitor Ooze, 3 copies of Mirror Shell Crab, 2 Tybalt's Trickery, 4 Throes of Chaos, 4 copies of Pyrokinesis, and 1 Maddening Hex. The Ave looks really interesting to me as far as, you know, maybe being a little bit better against counter magic, but as far as the rest of the stuff goes, what do you like?
So I had to read Tybalt's Trickery once again to really figure out how this works. So this is kind of funny. I believe it's going to work that way. You cast your own creative technique, then the opponent is in like the opponent's best world has 2 counterspells to fight over this, and then you Tybalt's Trickery your own copy of creative technique, I would guess, which means that you then basically like reveal cards from the top of your library until you find. Let me actually double check that. Yeah, you find another card, which is basically gonna be either another, another Cascader, because you can't find another copy of Creative Technique from the top of your deck, because Tybalt's Trickery says it has to be another card. So you do find another copy of Cascade, of any Cascade spell, and Cascade into another Creative Technique. So in a way, Tybalt's Trickery is like 2 mana counter spell that we can play in this deck by countering our own spell. It's like a remand on steroids, where you remand your own counter spell, but Tybalt's Trickery makes it so that you still get to cast it right again. That's very tricky, like the perfect name for a card like that. I hope I figured this out, because I'm completely clueless what Throes of Chaos is supposed to do for the deck. Maybe you can work that out, as I'm trying to, but maybe we'll see it in action at some point.
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, that's a 4 CMC thing, right? So it has to go into something lower. So I think Throws is part of the Tybalt's Trickery package, and like is a way to do it for 4 mana instead of doing it for 6. Is my guess. Is like you Throws into the Trickery into I don't, like I said, I don't really know, but it's my guess because that was something that was a combo deck for a little bit. But overall, I assume the Throws having Retrace is a big part of beating like very counterspell dense or interaction dense decks. And yeah, I mean, either way, like you mentioned, this matchup seems pretty good for Aren. It would not surprise me if there was not very heavy changes. You know, once again, Aren just looking to build to 6 mana as quickly as possible, do the thing. And Victor, I mean, has counter magic, but like you mentioned, you know, the demonstratability means that it's kind of insulated against the Force of Will stuff. And that gives this deck a pretty interesting position in the Legacy metagame if all you bring to the table is counterspells. Here's Abundant Growth going to be placed on Tundra, a card coming for Victor. No follow-up as far as main phase plays for Victor. And just a passing of the turn back to Aren, who already has the first depletion land in play, and is going to play a Dwarven Mine and pass the turn on back. Hickory Woodlot is the green depletion land that is untapped.
So at this point, if Victor has a wasteland, he needs to go for it, because otherwise Aren could go up all the way to 6 mana. Next turn, actually, I need to check whether she has Crystal Vein. I would think so. Or Ancient Tombs.
City of Traders too, and Ancient Tombs. Yeah, there's actually a lot. Yeah. Here's Delighted Halfling. That one we saw last game, and obviously very good against opposing counter magic. Aren's not bringing that to the table. You know, outside of Tybalt's Trickery, that's not really what we're doing. And there is the City of Trees that we called out. Here is 6 mana, and are we on Mr. Bones' wild ride once again? It looks like we are. Boarding party. Gotta get started here.
Oh my god, oh my god. Like this, we once again, we demonstrate. Victor's like, you got this. And
was this creative technique? Oh, it might be just an actual creative technique. Yeah, there's Omnath. I'm sorry. Yeah, so I thought it was boarding party because of the 6 mana. There's actually a mana floating that's not represented here, and that's a creative technique, which is going to go into the Spooner, Sweet Gum Recluse. And that's one of the good ones to hit first, because you hit it first, and then all the rest kind of end up above, like after the spider. So the spider's actually going to grow all your other stuff. So the ordering of the way you hit things does matter a little bit here as far as these Sweet Gum Recluses go.
Yeah, and the ideal sequence of cards is actually that you hit your most expensive Cascade spells, and then you only ever go down 1 mana, right? You go from your 8 to 7 to 6. If you ever go down from your 7 straight away all the way to your creative technique, you lose some actual additional value, but in the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't matter all that much, especially if your opponent's just like putting 2 halflings into play at this point. That's one of those crafts, which is like, I guess, another way to fight a counter war. You know, all these Cascade-based decks, they always have to find creative ways to cast basic things that would otherwise be available at a much lower mana cost, which of course in this case we can't really have, so we have to work around by putting a 7 mana crap into our deck.
Yeah, I mean, either way, I mean, just putting some stuff into play is a big part of the equation, I think, for Aren. Going to be able to have larger creatures than whatever the 5-color Zenith deck is going to put forth. And so kind of like you see in Living End, where you shore up the Living Ends a little bit and have like smaller Living Ends, like when we talk about the modern deck. This deck kind of can do the same thing, right? Where you put some of these utility creatures in, it shores up your huge turn a little bit, where you're not putting quite as much stuff into play, but it gives you the flexibility to have a little bit of interaction, as I think that is another boarding party. No, so that is creative technique. And that'll be creative technique number 3. One more in the deck, of course, only allowed to play 4. But here we go. Demonstrate happening once again. Both players shuffling up. Victor knows the agenda here. He's already shuffled up, ready to go. He gets the joke this go round. We'll see what he can hit to maybe disrupt some of this stuff here. Half the magic cards like Teferi Time Raveler, something that maybe Victor would reach for if he wanted. Oh, the Mirror Shell Crab's the only thing resolved. Could source the Plowshares.
That's something, I guess. You know, Victor loves the stack. Like, I'm pretty sure, like, between games, he was actually ordering some of the copies of this.
yeah, you got to get your creative techniques now. Head over to nerdragegaming.com. Get all your singles needs as we continue to cascade with this boarding party, finding the final copy of creative technique. You see the other 3 on the stack. Yeah, this is kind of the nature of the cascade mechanic. You just build these crazy stacks, and I have a feeling Aaron's going to be doing a lot of this today.
This deck can only ever grow in popularity once more people get to see it in action, because as you mentioned earlier, This might be one of the only videos on the entire internet where you actually get to see this, like in an actual tournament setting, as this is not available on Magic Online. Barely anyone ever plays in paper because of that. And maybe like 2 years from now, we're going to talk about, hey, did you know like nobody was playing Creative Technique back in 2023? Yeah, I can't believe it.
Yeah, maybe. And like it's funny too, because we saw in game 1, it seems like Wasteland would be something like pretty good against this strategy. And like Victor had a Wasteland, but like that's all he really had going for him. And like, okay, I'll wait an extra turn and then I'll go again next turn. Oh, Maelstrom Wanderer. That's one of the really good hits as it comes with 2 Cascades. Here's Mirror Shell Crab. That means everything's going to get haste if this Maelstrom Wanderer is allowed to continue to live. Second Cascade is going to happen here. That one can hit 6s, which is going to find this Aurora Phoenix, which will not find anything. So we can look through the deck and see how sideboarding changed, if any. Does not look like Victor's very interested. I do not believe that he is optimistic about his chances. And here is a Force of Will on the Maelstrom Wanderer itself. Okay, that stops haste. That stops some of the haste. That's something.
You can. I mean, that's a try, I guess. There's only like so many more creative techniques on the stack that will eventually find something. But I mean, you gotta try.
I mean, there's a chance. I mean, to the extent there's a way to get lucky, I believe trying to minimize the amount of haste damage has got to be part of the equation. As here is the second real copy of Creative Technique that is going to resolve.
I guess the only way all of this like really helps if you have like a way to untap into like Wrath of God or something, which very much underplayed in Legacy right now. We don't see that happening. But yeah, I just want to see how much damage we can actually produce in this turn once again. Aren, how deep are we going here? We got 3 crabs. We got a transformational sideboard into crabs. By the way, also figured out how it actually works with Throes of Chaos, which might have actually come in. Oh, and as we pack it up.
Yeah, no, we hit another Maelstrom Wanderer. Victor said the Force on the first one was how I was going to win and not die immediately. And no, yeah, that's the second one's going to cover it. And having 4 copies of Wanderer and, with the Emrakul kind of virtually giving things haste by giving you an extra turn, going to be good enough. And you called this deck out as something people hadn't really prepared for. Certainly seen that way with Victor. He did a lot of reading the cards. But like when the cards aren't available on Magic Online, like you said, this is one of the other places you can see it in action. And I tell you what, it was really impressive. That was turn 3, all these soul lands, and it beat a Wasteland in game 1. It's resilient to counter Magic. Like, this is the makings of a deck that's very, very powerful and very, very impressive. And what a ride it is to go through.
This is one of the true rogue decks in the format. Like, if you want to be flying under the radar right now in Legacy, this is what you do. Because I'm gonna guarantee you hit a tournament, like maybe 1 out of 9 at best of your opponents is actually gonna know what's happening on your deck.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly wouldn't until you explained all this to me at length here in the booth. I had no idea what was going on. So, like I said, it feels like I was playing some kind of casual wonky deck, but no, this is a 1-0 bracket. And now Aren gets a second win for her trouble, advances to 2-0, and a great start with a really cool deck here in Mundelein. So we'll see if we can get our backup match fired up, where we have another Cascade deck. This one a little bit more traditional. Versus one of our players to watch. Who has a great start to their season. We have A playing the 8-cast deck. So there you see Temur Cascade. This one a little bit more face up about what it's doing as far as cascading goes, and a little bit more traditional with the turn 1 suspend crashing footfalls. We'll see what A can present. Here's Bobble, here's a Mox Opal, here is Urza's Bobble. So Bobble, Opal. The Opal now makes mana thanks to Metal Craft, and that is going to produce an Emissary, Lurker of the Lock trigger. Mill 4 cards. Sai, Emissary, Lotus Petal, and Urza's Saga, the mill from Emissary.
Yeah, the Monoblue 8-cast deck, if left to its own devices, like this deck can goldfish really quickly and get out of control. At some point, you draw so many cards, your opponent is not really be able to keep up with you. The trample of the rhinos would come in pretty clutch because the deck is able to make a bunch of like blockers with Sai. There's actually a very real world where just like the rhinos are not going to do it because there's just going to be too many Sai tokens that just like, eat up the rhinos. And other than that, the Legacy Rhino deck, sometimes you see something like Minskin Boo. I'm not seeing that in this deck list here. This is, I guess, Murktide region, but that's actually horrible against Sai as well. I would feel pretty confident about Adam's chances here in the matchup as Daniel just sits back and watches something that he probably doesn't want to see on the other side of the board. This, from everything I can tell, is not a good matchup for Temur Cascade.
Yeah, Daniel certainly, in a little bit of a tight spot. Here is the copy of Thoughtcast. Of course, this deck's called 8-Cast, named after Thoughtcast, the kind of the original effect of this. And in response, we're going to pitch Elvish Spirit Guide and get things started with Crashing Footfalls thanks to Violent Outbursts. And this is exactly what you were talking about at the end of the Modern rounds. You know, we saw Temur Rhinos take our entire Modern tournament down, and we see it kind of having a great start here in our Legacy event as well, able to kind of power it out a little bit faster. The Spirit Guides, both flavors, Simian and Elvish, legal in this format, and here we're going to see some Rhinos able to kick things off. And like you mentioned, the trample going to be really, really relevant, especially in the absence of Psy, which Adams does not yet have access to. So we'll see. A has 2 cards coming, can start to present things like Thought Monitors and really get these Thought Cast effects going, as we see that Mox Opal getting tapped here once again. And here's a second copy of Thoughtcast. This is what the deck does. This is why it's called 8-Cast. It puts all these artifacts into play, recoups all their cards with these Thoughtcast effects, and then continues to, find payoffs for the artifacts, be it Urza's Saga, Psy, Emery, stuff like that, after drawing all these cards. And A's had a great start to that exact game plan here, though does have quite a bit of pressure on them at the moment. 2 copies of Rhinos already present.
Yeah, Daniel, right now, he got what he need. Like, you need early Rhinos, especially in the first game where you got, like, no, I don't know, silver bullets available. What Adam needs is, there's a couple of things you can go about this. You can make a Kappa Cannoneer, which is soon gonna, like, basically when it comes to play is already bigger than the Rhinos. You can try to rely on Shadow Spear to recoup some of the life that you might lose to Rhinos. You can try to make a really big construct, which will eventually pick up a Shadow Spear. So there's many, many ways for Daniel to just, like, have his game plan go wrong. But if Adam somehow just keeps drawing into either more card draw or stuff that he doesn't really care about, right? Force of Thoughtcasts, and all the other things, like, I guess even Chalice of the Void, unless it comes down before the second Rhinos, doesn't really do too much. There are additional copies of Emery. Like, there's a way that Adams can be drawing dead here at some point, but he still has, like, I want to say, like 10 cards to draw before things could become problematic. So I'm still feeling pretty confident on the other side of the board here. And I think 8-Cast has so many card draws here just from the bobble that we cracked, then for the turn. Then I'm pretty sure I saw another copy of what was Thought Monitor in hand. I think there was a slight head shake on Adam's side of the board. But yeah, this is basically what we need. We need a way to make constructs, because right now those constructs are going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like, they're already big enough to just, like, completely neutralize the Rhinos.
Yeah, but there's no constructs coming this turn. So, A is going to need to find some ways to mitigate the damage. Obviously, there's more Rhinos coming down the line, but those are a little bit in the future. For now, I mean, there's 2 that are still crashing in. And once you take another hit for 8, only 1 Rhino's lethal. So your 1 construct you're going to make off Urza's Saga is not quite good enough. You're going to need to find something else. And you mentioned Kappa Cannoneer as potentially part of the equation. That's a great way to get something that's likely going to be big enough to eat some Rhinos, like, on the, like, now, because Urza's Saga, like we mentioned, is going to be a little bit too slow. You can also build it up with things like side tokens, Thought Monitors. That would require a ton of game actions, and we're not quite there yet. Although, of course, as you mentioned, quite a few redraws. We're going to see exactly what they can present as. Here's a Pithing Needle. Gonna quickly respond with Wooded Foothills. Is Daniel not getting got by that? Either way, it's still an artifact that will grow the constructs. Something you can tap for Cannoneer and stuff like that. So even with nothing really relevant for Rhinos to name, you can name like Fetchlands or whatever. I think you are still gonna get mana out of this.
I think in the dark you name Minsk, just because that's sometimes like a 2 of, sometimes even a 4 of. Here we know that Daniel doesn't have any copies of those, but that's probably the 1 card you want to name here, especially since Daniel has been sitting on like 3 mana for a while. He could actually be holding another copy of Minsk, and there's, as you mentioned, otherwise there's only just like Fetchland you might want to name.
Sure, yeah. Like what was that? Oh, there's Fire Ice. That's gonna make side tokens look a little bit worse. And yeah, the players, of course, Urza's Bobble getting to do the random reveal thing. Pretty bad template. I can't imagine they'd do that again if they could go back. But here we go. Another Violent Outburst that is going to cascade into another copy of Crashing Footfalls. And this is one of those moments where 8-Cast as a 4X like Chalice deck, you really wish you had some access to some of your Chalice of the Voids. It does stop a lot of your zeros, but being able to keep this from happening does a lot to mitigate the game plan, as Daniel going to find 2 more Rhinos. And from what we see right here, that looks very lethal to me.
Yeah, this might actually be too much to handle for Adams here. And I'm wondering what he's got in hand, because there's a world where he actually has Force of Will in hand, since he drew so many cards, but you haven't really seen anything of like actual value come down, or relevance rather. So maybe he's going to try to fight over this with a Force of Will. Of course, Daniel could be in a position to fight back. And unless we see 8-cast hits like a couple of runner cards from the top here, I think Daniel might be able to steal this game, even though, like, for most of it, he has been in a pretty disadvantageous position. Adam's trying to
maybe
figure this
it
out.
certainly looked disadvantaged if you're counting and tracking all the game actions taken, right? A has taken a lot more game actions and stuff like that, but these rhinos are just so powerful and so large that, you know, Adams, despite taking a lot of game actions, has not actually assembled really anything to block or overpower any of these rhinos. And, you know, Daniel, even though it really looks like he hasn't done much, is able to just win right there. Yeah, right there. There's Murktide on top. Check the top card. And that's going to do it for game number 1. Going to be picked up by the actual Temur Cascade deck, looking to cascade into Rhinos. So more of a Temur Rhinos deck, I'd say.
This actually looks like the kind of game that we mentioned as one of the scenarios where Adams actually loses, because we drew so many cards, but apparently there were like no chalices, no Force of Wills, no Kappa Cannoneers. It's pretty hard like to win from there if your opponent is throwing something like, what was it in the end, like 16 power onto you with Trample. But the deck still has a lot of play. So looking at the sideboard, what do we have here? Okay, this is interesting. This is... You see those Force of Negations in the sideboard, right? And I think those are going to come in. But do you know why they are actually there?
I do not.
Okay, so a big mistake that a lot of A-cast players have made in the past is when they play against something like, let's say, Delver, or anything that has like a, what would it be, like a Meltdown or something that completely screws you. People often sided out their Force of Wills because they were like, okay, we're just going to play the card advantage game and win that way. No. Your deck is so powerful, so insanely powerful, that you actually bring in 4 copies of Force of Negation just to fight over the hate that the opponent is going to bring in. You know, in Legacy, it's very common to take out Force of Wills if you're playing against fair decks. No, 8-cast does it completely the other way around. You bring in 4 copies of Force of Negation to fight over the hate. You don't like grind through the hate because you know you can take the card disadvantage and then just build your deck from there. So those are going to come in. And looking at the rest, anything that sticks out to you, not so much for me, really.
Yeah, no, not super interested in a lot here. Like, you can try to bring in some blasts if you think there's some kind of like meltdown pivot that's going to happen. I do believe we have open deck lists here, so that's probably not going to happen, as we do know that the Temur Cascade deck does not have any copies of the very powerful red sorcery meltdown that is kind of the hate card of choice. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at the Temur Cascade deck. Force Negation likely the only thing to bring in here. We got 3 copies of Endurance, 2 Fury, the 3 Minskin Booze, the 2 called out, 2 Inevitable Betrayal, 3 copies of Force of Vigor, and 2 Blood Moons. What kind of adjustments are we making here to beat up on some artifacts?
So, as you would probably have guessed, right, Force of Vigor, the premium spell against 8-cast, very often actually not enough, but if you pair it up with a Quick Clock, as this deck has available, then Force of Vigor is definitely going to be the change that you need in some matchups to swing the tempo game around in your face, especially if you hit, let's say, Urza Saga. So that's definitely going to come in. For the rest, like, Mints could come in because it provides a source of trampling damage and also some kind of reach. So I could see those 6 cards coming in. The Inevitable Betrayal really only gets you Kappa Cannoneer, and I don't think that's going to be good enough. Maybe
small
it is
changes for both players, but yeah. I think basically pretty much looking at that the same kind of deck, no real wild jukes, as A is going to move here to turn 2. We had a turn 1 Aether Spell Bomb, only a Wooded Foothills for Daniel, and then a turn 2 Saga. No follow-up from A. This is something that you don't see too much of with the 8-cast deck. You kind of think of it like, you know, your traditional like 0 mana Mox Opal artifact deck where you just spit out a bunch of artifacts and get stuff going. Could represent either, like, you know, maybe some respect for drawing Chalice, maybe shaved on some zeros, or we just have a hand that's kind of based around Sai, and we're looking to, you know, hold a lot of those zeros until Sai does make its way to the battlefield, as we fetch a Taiga and play an untapped, what is this, the Seagate Restoration, whatever the flip side is. I'm sure Seagate's something, and it looks like that's going to be coming in untapped for Daniel.
Yeah, and here we got the Spirit Guides going for the right. Oh no, okay, yeah, well, we're putting 10.
Well, yeah, the Charlotte's Agent to find some rhinos right now. Seagate Reborn is the card. So yeah, untapped land, there's a Spirit Guide already ready to fire up. The Crashing Footfalls, a turn ahead of schedule from what decks in like this in Modern can present, and it has the same power. Now we're looking at a 2-turn clock right now. On turn 2, you know, you're threatening to be dead by turn 4 by just what's in play. Of course, the Aether Spellbomb does change that equation a little bit, able to answer a token quite cleanly, and then we can start making things like constructs and all that kind of stuff. So we'll see exactly what kind of response A has. You know, we saw they weren't really able to handle the onslaught of tokens that happened and came down in game 1. But game 2, we got a couple more options.
Yeah.
And how many cards
the spell bomb is really good here. What A wants to pair up with the spell bomb is an Emissary, right? If you're able to cast spell bomb every single turn, your Rhino's opponent is gonna like have a big headache to just like get over that as you keep removing the Rhinos. But right now, no Emissary, as we already demonstrated. A doesn't have it available last turn, probably won't have it available next turn. Might be forced to just like cash in that. Okay, Force of Will. Force of Will is great. Force of Will is going to give us a lot of time. If Danny is not going to fight back, then A can probably just like play a normal game from here. Like the 2/2 you don't really care all that much about.
Right, yeah, 2/2 is a lot less of a clock than 10 power. So, A, having a lot more time, and if we have another mana source, which we do not, the constructs could add to the mix, but does not look like they're going to, as we very quickly pass back to Daniel, who, had a very explosive first round of Rhinos. If there is, another Cascader here, which does not look there is, so we're going to cash in the Spellbomb, draw a card. Both players stuck on 2 mana-producing lands. As A going to draw, Saga could go up to 3, and we're going to go a search and mana floating for A.
Yeah, they might actually get Mox Ouphe. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah,
That's
sure
assuming they have like another source of like it's any kind of 0 mana artifact in play. And that's gonna build up the mana. As soon as you get enough mana to like start casting your Thought Cast, for example, or even your Thought Monitors, you're out of the worst part of the opening. You can actually like proceed into like if you want to make like a chess comparison, like it's the mid game. And at some point you completely explode. But your opponent, once again, throwing another 10 power, you're bringing that all the way up to 12 power, which is threatening to end the game in 2 swings. And once again, Trample being super relevant here, even if we find like one of our size or anything. No, okay. A says, we don't do that here. And
A says, I kept to say I have not a lot of artifacts, but I got Force of Will, so take these crashing footfalls somewhere else.
This is a no trampling zone. We only allow creatures that don't trample, okay? This is basically like my upstairs neighbor.
Extremely fair. And this one, this doesn't produce a Charlotte's Agent. So the clock effectively being the same, more or less. And each time we're trading 2 cards for 2 cards, right? Force, pitch a blue card, which has been Thought Monitor, very important to the 8-cast game plan. And actually that was in response to, I believe, casting one of the artifacts so that Mox Opal was not online in order to maybe increase the chances that the Violent Outburst into Crashing Footfalls would all resolve. Did not. Shardless Agent going to continue to beat down for 2 more points of damage, but Ace done a great job Force of Willing these Crashing Footfalls from Daniel. And now, still under some pressure, but if A has anything resembling some, payoffs for having some artifacts in play, it might be just about time as Daniel finds another piece of pressure in the form of a Murktide Regent. This one's gonna be a 6/6. Here's the suspended Crashing Footfalls, 4 turns on that one. Brazen Borrow your Murktide Regent. A's just got all the answers.
This is perfect magic, right? Going toe-to-toe here. Like, nobody's ever really able to pull fully ahead as we chain 2 Mox Opals together to get a Sai. Dude, Sai, such a big deal. We know that eventually there's probably going to be another Murktide coming back down again once Daniel has assembled a bigger graveyard. But it's completely, like, useless in the face of Sai, as Sai will now soon start to accumulate a lot more tokens. What are these tokens actually?
You have so much time, right? Like you can make so many tokens that maybe even these Rhino tokens, you'll be able to just put 4, Thopters in front of and maybe get some progress there. They're not very good, right away, but there's a lot of time when this Crashing Footfall is going to come down. Now we did see off of the Urza's Bauble another copy of Murktide Regent, but Daniel has the Fury that's going to pitch a Violent Outburst to take care of the Sai. Adams down to 2 permanents, make that 3 thanks to Island. Here's a Mishra's Bauble and just a passing of the turn back, and now it looks like A's finally out of gas, and the Charlotte's Agent starting to represent a real clock as this Crashing Footfalls continues to tick down. Here's Brazen Borrower.
I wonder if Danny actually brought in additional copies of Fury just because Sai is such a big deal in the matchup. If you can, like, if you leave Sai unchecked for a couple of turns, your Rhinos are basically like gonna be completely taken out by that card without A even having to spend any kind of mana on that. And A is able to now cast most of the cards in that deck, I think. Okay, we're gonna get in for 3 damage. If it's not blocking, it's certainly attacking.
You can't block, so you might as well get those 3 points. As we pass back to Daniel, who's more or less also seems out of gas, this Murktide Regent, even if we finally are able to cast it, which we're still kind of a card short from being able to do that, would only be a 3/3. However, not a whole lot going on for A either. Is able to block a 3/3, so maybe we wait till these Footfalls comes off, able to delve that away as well. Does shape up for maybe a low impact turn, unless Daniel was able to draw something off the top.
Oh
no! Here's Elvish Spirit Guide cast.
Elvish Spirit Guide, one of the most confusing cards in Legacy. It has rings, but it can't fly. Like, what's going on there?
It can't fly. It's just can't. It's a spirit. I mean, it's just kind of stuck on the ground. I don't know what to tell you. Look, it's on the ground in the art. May have some wings. Penguins have wings too. They don't fly.
Oh yeah, you get a point. You get a point. We need maybe that's going to be the blue spirit guide at some point. Penguin spirit guide. Yeah,
sure. Yeah. Another thing with wings doesn't fly. Keep the theme going. I'm about it. That's a lot of things being tapped. Is this a Kappa Cannoneer? It sure is. Going to get a trigger thanks to its weirdly structured triggered ability that allows it to get a counter every time an artifact enters. That includes itself. But here is Crashing Footfalls. That means 2 rhinos on the way and a Murktide now able to be cast if Daniel so wishes. Only going to be a 4/4 in the air though.
Thing is, Daniel might just be dead. If A has enough artifacts next turn, then yeah, we can just get basically the free block here. And A might be able to just swing for lethal next turn. We got a 5/5, so we need like 3 more artifacts or a way to get rid of the Murktide, because then we're already like completely over the finish line. But A needs to find a couple of artifacts. Ideally, something to draw cards. There's 1 artifact. We grow to 6/6. That's
6.
just not good enough
Yet. 4 mana
another Kappa Cannoneer.
Oh, it's Odawara! Bounce the Murktide, and that symbol's lethal. Not able to block the Kappa Cannoneer, plus Brazen Borrower. That's going to get the job done. So that Brazen Borrower we made fun of not quite being fast enough definitely was there. And A, going to go ahead and pick up game number 2. And with us here in a time shifted, we have the magical powers to dive directly into game number 3. So with that, let's dive right in with these players who have played, very quick Magic and some really, really tight games here. I did not expect such an interactive matchup here between this Temur Legacy Rhinos deck and the 8-cast deck, but it has been quite interesting and some great Magic we've seen from both players, as Daniel now once again going to be on the play and see if he can get out in front of the 8-cast deck.
Yeah, I think being on the draw is probably one of the hard, super hard for the 8-cast deck, unless you get a really quick opening. If you get a quick opening, you can basically negate all of the tempo disadvantage you're suffering from being on the draw. But if you're trying to, try to get an Urza Saga going and make it work that way, while Daniel has like a Spirit Guide field start, and I mean, this is Legacy. This might be like Rhinos at the end of Ace turn right now. Then Ace.
Yeah, you could have 2 Spirit Guides and just get it fired up right now. 8 Spirit Guides in the deck. Although Ace starting off with a very, very typical 8-cast opening like we didn't really see last game. We did see this game. 2 Mishra's Baubles, Mox Opal, Emissary. Going to respond to that one is Daniel, very quickly fetching with Wooded Foothills. Maybe has some kind of interaction here for Emissary. Or, like you mentioned, maybe it's just Rhino time right now.
Could be. I mean, there's... Okay, he probably announced it right away. Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, that would have been a sweet thing. If you could keep Emissary. Oh, and then in response
to the first chapter, Force of Vigor, there goes all of your mana producing sources and only 2 Mishra's Baubles left. So Daniel, not a Rhino's hand, but able to pitch the Spirit Guide to the alternate mode of Force of Vigor. Going to do it the hard way, suspending the Crashing Footfalls from hand. And Mishra's Baubles here on instep going to get cracked by A. So maybe we'll find some more mana producing lands, and we sure will. See to the Synod.
Yeah, like I told you, a lot of times the first hate spell is not going to be lights out for you unless you have like a decent clock. Right now, Daniel on somewhat of a slower clock, unless you violent outbursts right away at this point. A still like with all the chances in the world, assuming that he will find like some kind of gas in the form of like Thoughtcast or really anything. He's got all the tools in his deck to completely ignore the Rhinos once you get the bigger creature down, but you need your mana. And if Daniel ever finds, let's say, the second copy of Force of Vigor or an additional copy of Rhinos, then A will struggle. But right now, I think like it's a pretty open game because A did find extra mana to play.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't look like Daniel had a ton going on. He is fetching here, I believe, on end step. Maybe he has another Cascade effect, but doesn't look like he does. So just tick down in the Footfalls. Not a whole lot going on. Not even like a Murktide Region or anything. Just a 4th land passing in the turn. So A has a little bit of time. 2 more turns left on this Crashing Footfalls before they're going to be under some pressure. So they have some time to rebuild after that devastating Force of Vigor.
Yeah.
Emissary.
Here comes the Emissary. Yeah. Emissary, at the very least, is going to make it so that eventually you're going to be drawing like 2 cards a turn. Oh, dude, there's
Kappa Monitor and Kappa Cannoneer are some payoffs. So you're not just doing the bobble thing. You can actually just get some real payoffs out of the yard right away. And that actually might be good enough to battle down some of these Rhinos. I think Daniel's going to need a little bit more help. But once again, he also has time as Emissary summoning sick, not able to get to business right away as the Footfall is going to tick down one more time. Number 1, 5th land past the turn. Maybe Hardcast Force well represented?
probably, right? There's really not all that much else that we would be doing with 5 mana here. I guess there's like worlds where you want to pay for Mystic, the counterspell. But right now, it feels like A, very much in the driver's seat. I think if we have enough artifacts, I think we don't to get the Kappa Cannon down. Okay, one more turn of just setting up, just getting more stuff into play. We do see that there's probably no Force of Figure on Daniel's side of the board. And this is the last turn where I say Daniel can like significantly disrupt A, because once A starts untapping and making constructs, and
my,
we got the
Kappa Cannon from hand. That's going to answer the hard cast Force of Will. And A actually saw one of the cards in Daniel's hand at the end of his turn. It was a Force of Negation. That is the last card in his hand right now. A had the Force of Will blue card, pitching Thoughtcast right away to answer that. And Daniel cannot cast the Force of Negation because he hard cast the Force of Will. So now stuck with the Force of Negation in hand. That's going to mean that the Kappa Cannoneer is going to resolve. And now the rhinos might not actually be good enough, as Daniel more or less out of action.
Oh, that must be Fury.
Yeah, these rhinos are summoning sick. Very, very confusing. Most suspend creatures get haste. These are not creatures; they're tokens that are made, and they don't get haste. So that's very,
okay. So Drake, we saw that Daniel wanted to attack that. Does that attack tell you that Daniel might actually be holding a Fury? Because you're basically giving up one of your rhinos, right? Crashing into the 5/5. But that attack really only makes sense if you have like a Fire Ice or a Fury. But a Fire Ice,
I would have to match just like Fire Ice, right? Not a whole else as getting through, as Artifact going to enter the play, going to grow the Kappa Cannoneer, and A, actually interested in getting busy, believes that they can win the race. Makes a lot of sense now that Urza's Saga is online to make constructs. We're going to start cracking some baubles, still going to be more than big enough to start blocking some rhinos profitably. So A in the driver's seat, like you mentioned, in this match, just the ability to produce these constructs at instant speed. 2 cards coming from the baubles.
Yeah, and A is so far ahead, I think they won't even lose the game if there's like a Force of Figure coming down. Yeah, Daniel sees the writing on the wall.
Daniel sees the writing on the wall. That's it. Wow, what an action-packed match between these two decks. Incredibly interactive. That Force of Vigor looked so devastating there in game number 1. And as devastating as it was, with no pressure follow-up, A had so much time to rebuild and was able, thanks to Emissary and the host of other Urza Saga, all those kind of pieces that the deck's known for its power, able to rebuild and go on to win the match. So impressive performance from A, and a great start to this tournament. A on our leaderboard, I believe number 4, looking to continue to climb as this weekend goes on, and a great start for them.